All right, hello, fellow coders. Welcome back to the FreshVotes series where we are building a real-world Java web application from scratch, leveraging Spring Boot and other beautiful technologies. So in this episode, this is going to be sort of almost an intermediary step of an episode. I want to freshen up, pun intended, the landing page here because there's no login button. I want to be able to click login and then go to the /login page because, like I said in the previous video, it's annoying having to manually type that in. And then once we actually log in, this dashboard needs a little bit of love in terms of making this look a little bit prettier. So that's the goal for this video. You're going to learn a little bit about some Bootstrap stuff here, but on the home page with the login button, you probably won't learn very much. But anyway, we'll start there. The login stuff should be pretty quick. So we need our home page, which is, I think we did index.html. Yeah, is our home page. So here we want to be able to put a login button in the top corner, but we might as well also leverage Bootstrap for this as well. So let's go to another page. Let's bring in Bootstrap, which is right here. We have some CSS. Oh, right, and I keep promising that at some point I'm going to show you how to make it so that you don't have to keep on copy pasting the same stuff over and over again to leverage something called a fragment inside of what's it called, time leaf, that allows you to create sort of like a common header sort of thing, common imports for everything, so that if you need to make an update to it, it'll automatically update all the pages and not having you have to like copy paste everything all over the place. Anyway, we will get there. Maybe we'll do that in the next video because that's interesting stuff. In any case, we'll bring in Bootstrap here, and the reason being is I want to be able to add a container here. So what that will do, like I'd said previously, is it just sort of puts some borders around this, so it'll make it more center it a little bit. So if I refresh, it centers it a bit, and you see it changes the font. So that's sort of what Bootstrap does. It just makes it look, not Times New Roman or whatever the default font is, makes it look a little bit more modern, if you will. And then I will create a row. Inside of this row, we will have the welcome to FreshVotes and on the one side, and on the other side, we'll have a login button. So all that should be on the same row, in my opinion. That's how I would like to, design it, if you will. So we'll bring that up here, and we'll create another div class. Div class column. And we will, for example, have a button type equals button, and we'll call this ID equals login, and the text will say login. Oh, and also we need a class here. Class equals btn. We'll call it a primary button so that it's nice and blue and big. And there you go. So that's what that looks like. Now, obviously, this is not... when I did call here, it essentially assigns equal weight to each of the each of the widths, right? So the width of each is sort of identical. 6 columns here, 6 columns there, which is why the login button isn't necessarily more facing towards the right hand side of the screen, and that's not the best. So what I'll do is I'll be more specific, and I will say maybe 8 columns here and 4 columns there, because again, this number, these two numbers together for each row need to add up to 12. So that might push it over a little bit, which it does, but I would kind of like to align it to the right as best I can, and I always forget how to do that. So I need to figure out how to do that. And do I have any examples of me doing that somewhere else? Form control. I'm just looking to... Oh, here we go. Float right. Phew! I found it. So I always forget what that value is. Class is float right. So that will pull it to the right a bit more. Oh, it didn't. Is that because I messed that up? Let me go back to here. Yeah, button class, btn info. Oh yeah, btn large too. Sometimes we've been making large buttons. Float right. So that looks correct. Div class. Now, that was, I had put the float right on the button, not on the div. So maybe that's the difference. So let's put the float right, instead of on the div, let's put it on the button to see if it makes a difference. And it does. Okay, so there you go. You need to put it on the button. Do I know why that is? I can't explain with my deep-seated level of HTML and CSS knowledge, do I know why it doesn't work to float a div? It must be something to do with the divs, and divs are block display, whereas buttons are probably not block. They're probably inline or something, and floating only works on inline elements. That's my guess. It probably is something similar to that. The difference between an element and a div, or an inline element versus a div, which is a block element. So anyway, I don't want to get too deep into the weeds there. That's, more deep-seated HTML, CSS stuff. So that's how we do that. And then one thing I don't like as well is it's a bit too close to the top. So let's put a little bit of padding. We'll put that on the, you can put bottom margin on the container, or you can put top margin on the row. I don't think it really matters one way or the other, but I will just add some inline style and say margin top is, 2 M's or something like that. So that way it pushes it down a little. There we go. So now, but when we click on the login button, nothing happens. So there's 2 ways that we can fix this. One way is to use some jQuery to add a click event to the login button and redirect, or a bit of a sneakier thing to do is maybe change this from a button to be an anchor tag. So instead of button, we're going to make this an anchor tag. Oops. Make this an anchor tag with a href of, we could probably just make it an href. We don't need to augment it with time leaf. We'll just say /login, and we'll say type is button. Let's see if that works. So it changes the look a little bit. Do you see the difference there? It's a little bit more boxy. Is that actually, was that my eyes deceiving me? Let's refresh. Yeah, see, it's a bit more rounded. So it does change the look and feel, which I don't like that very much. So let's leave it as a button. Let's leave it as a button and just do more work in terms of having some, well, tell you what, let's for once not use jQuery. Okay, let's use plain old JavaScript. All right, so let's see if I can do this, because I think there's a way to do this. There's an interesting website called You Might Not Need jQuery or something like that. I think that's the name of it. So shout out to those guys. Yeah, you might not need jQuery.com. Shout out to these guys, because it's kind of a neat. It's one of those things where if you can't use jQuery, I'm so dependent on jQuery and everything that I forget how to do it in regular old JavaScript code, right? So they have different sections of like, oh, here's how you do JSON stuff, post stuff, request stuff, effects. But basically what I want to do is selecting. So if I scroll down, is there anything for select? Or no, it's not selecting. I want events. So if I look for events, here we go. jQuery off, on, ready, trigger. I guess it is on. So add event listener. So you have the jQuery version, and then you have the non-jQuery version, right? So the element.add event listener, event name, event handler, right? So we can paste that in here, and we will work from there. But first, you need the EL stands for the element, so we need to grab the element. So how do you grab an element? How do you select an element with plain old JavaScript? So what you can do is you can say var or let, doesn't matter. Either keyword works for this purpose. I guess I should use let because it's more of the better, the more recent ES6 or whatever version for JavaScript. So we'll say let login btn equal, and then you use document.getElementById. Make special note of the capitalizations of things. If you don't capitalize correctly, it won't work. So get element by ID, and the ID is login. Okay. Also note you don't use a pound here. I don't believe you use a pound because you're already specifying by ID over here, so you don't need to specify the pound. And also, believe it or not, with JavaScript, you don't need semicolons at the end either. When you do like a what do they call them? A linter, which checks to see how good your code is, it'll actually tell you to remove the semicolons. So there you go. I'm just so used to putting semicolons in because of my background with Java, right? So it's just second nature to put a semicolon. Anyway, so we grab the login button. So this line here is equivalent to saying, it's equivalent to this with jQuery. It's equivalent to saying pound login, and then, well, that's really it. It's equivalent to saying let login btn equal pound login. Okay, so these two lines are equivalent in terms of what they do. And then, like we saw here, the add event listener is equivalent to saying on event name add an event handler, okay, using jQuery. So yeah, just to give you an idea of what's going on here. So add event listener, the event name will be what? The event name is on click, right? Because when we click the login button, we want it to do something. What do we want it to do? Well, we can put an inline function here, an anonymous function. And what do we want it to do? We want it to say, what is it? Window.location.href equals, and we're going to go to the login URL. Okay, we'll redirect to the login URL. All right, so let's see if this works. This was unplanned, as always. We'll refresh. And first, I'll check and see if I have any JavaScript errors. I do. So cannot read property, add event listener of null. So I did not do my selecting properly. When I said document.getElementById login, it did not like that. So let me add a breakpoint and refresh. So the login button is null. So document getElementById, which is the right function, login. Do I need to put a pound? Did I outright lie to your face? I don't think so. Let's say document.getElementById example, and document.getElementById web APIs. We put the ID in here. Some examples. Let's see. Yeah, document getElementById. PARA, where PARA is probably some sort of, yeah, here's an ID here. Well, that's a little strange. I must have a typo or something. Document.getElementById login. Login is right here. Okay, so the only other thing I can think of is that the login button hasn't been, yeah, because this is in the header. So the only thing I can think of is we need to move this script from the header to be below where the button renders on the screen. So maybe the button hasn't been rendered yet, and JavaScript can't see it. That's my best guess. Which is why we have the initializer for jQuery. We have the $, and then the open bracket, close bracket, the initializer thing that I always tell you to do. So now, as you can see, there's no jQuery error or JavaScript error anymore. So that was the issue. The issue is the script needs to be below here. But you could probably also do, you might not need jQuery. There's probably the equivalent of the ready. So here's the initializer thing that I always say to use. But in here, you can say the equivalent for IE 9+ is to do this stuff. But you see how much more verbose it is without jQuery. This is why, I don't know why jQuery gets such a bad name these days. It's very handy. It saves you a lot of typing and a lot of, hassle. But anyway, that's just the way of the world here. So now let's test it. Let's click on login, and there you go. It redirects a login page. So beautiful. That's exactly what I wanted to do. So the next thing I want to do is make this part look prettier. Okay, and how do we do that? Well, inside of, if we go to getbootstrap.com, I'm going to take some more sip of coffee, and we say get started, we can go into, let's see, the contents, where is it? Components, and inside of components, I want to use where's it? Jumbotron. Here we go. So a Jumbotron sort of helps to visually contain elements, right? It gives a very poignant view. It gives you a very highlighted view of elements on the screen. So that's what I like about a Jumbotron. So if we add a Jumbotron class to the product area, it's going to sort of highlight the products and make it distinct from the sort of FreshVotes dashboard title here. So I'm going to try to wrap all this stuff inside of a Jumbotron. You'll have to excuse my mother-in-law just arrived with my son, so there's going to be some noise in the background. So inside of the dashboard page, there is, let's see, the container. We have the FreshVotes dashboard text with the logout button. And then in here, in this div, is where we list out all of our products. So we're going to wrap all of that inside of a Jumbotron, which means we're going to take all this stuff, tab it in a bit and end the div tag for the Jumbotron. Okay, so let's take a look and see what that looks like. So you see how that visually sort of separates the two things. Again, it's not the prettiest thing in the world, but it gives some separation of your concerns and whatnot. Okay, so then H1 class display 4. Interesting. I've never seen that before. At least I've never paid attention to it. So display 4, lead, my 4. Yeah, there's all these new classes that I haven't seen before. And then this simple hero unit, a simple Jumbotron style component for calling extra attention to a featured content. Yeah, it uses utility classes for typography and spacing to space content out. Okay, so that is sort of that's what I had in my mind for separating these things. Now, I also don't necessarily love the amount of spacing between products and the top here. One way that we might get that to be smaller is to switch products to an H2. Let's just see what that looks like. Yeah, there you go. It looks a little bit better. There's still a lot of space, and I mean, if you really want to, you can, for the row here, again, you can add some inline style and say margin top is maybe some negative margin to move it up a bit. But anyway, this is all just, this is all cosmetic stuff. So really, that's really all I wanted to do, was to be able to separate the dashboard title with the products that are being listed. Okay, so just completely cosmetic stuff. So now there we go. We have this functional workflow where we can, if we're on the home page, we can click on the login button, go to the login screen, and then get in there, and we can log out back to this screen, and so on and so forth. So you don't really have to do a lot of URL manipulation. And if I wanted to go one step further, I could maybe have a button on here to go back home. Right? So I think maybe we'll get to that in the next video. What I'll do is I will create a header. I'll create a header element that will be present on all pages, and then I will tie that into using fragments, because fragments are very powerful, in my opinion, with Timeleaf. It gives you this sort of really robust templating type stuff. They call them fragments, but allows you to not have to copy paste code everywhere when it comes to, if you need to make a change, you can make a change in one place and it affects all the places. They call that a fragment. I would call that more of a template, but that's, hey, we're splitting hairs there. So we will create a header element that will appear on all the pages, and then that header element will eventually make a bit dynamic, and so on and so forth. But anyway, that's what we'll do in the next lesson. We will learn about fragments, we will create a header, and we will start to clean up some of our code. So I look forward to seeing you there. As always, take care of yourself, happy learning, and before I say bye for now, if you're watching this on YouTube and you liked the video, please do give it a like. If you didn't like it, go ahead and give it a downvote, if you will, or an unlike, a dislike. And if you have any questions at all, leave a comment in the comment section, and I will get to it as soon as I possibly can to help you out. All right? And hey, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, again, if you're watching this on YouTube. So thank you, take care, bye for now.